Chapter 1, Part 5, we are talking about domain and range, and we start by discussing interval notation. And this might be something new, and this is going to deal with the parentheses and the brackets. So we use the parentheses if the endpoints are not included. They would be also represented with less than or greater than with the inequality in an open endpoint on a graph. The brackets are used if the points are included, so they're equal to. So less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, or closed points on your graph. So 1 through 4 here, we are just kind of going from inequality to interval notation. So the first thing that we did in class is we took a look took a look at the numbers. So we said, okay, we're going to have a -6, 3. So we're just getting those from there. And then we're going to look at the inequality symbols. So they're both less than or equal to, which means that they are included. So we are going to put brackets around our -6 and our 3. So any of those numbers, -6 and 3, including through 3, including them are part of the x's. Number 2, same start, 0, 17. I'm getting the numbers from here. And we're looking at our symbols, which are both less than. So less than is going to get represented by a parenthesis because they are not included. Number 3, we have our -1, 10 from our inequality. And now we're looking at our less than, which would be a parenthesis. Our less than or equal to would be a bracket because it's an included point. For number 4, we have our -2, 29. And we want to look to see what inequalities we have. We have less than or equal to, which would be represented by a bracket. And we have less than, which would be a parenthesis. So this is something that you're going to have to remember. And, open points are not included, closed points are included. So for 52A, we are only going to look at the domain and range, the in words part. So we are going to skip that, and we're not going to look at the graphs either. Instead, when you look at the picture, your domain are your possible x values. So I'm going to make a note, this is x values. So we're going from left to right. So as we go from left to right, our first x value is going to be a -1. We don't have anything until our next point, which the x value is a 1. And then we have a final point where the x value is a 2. So our domain for this graph, it is discrete. The points aren't connected. The x values are -1, 1, and 2. And that's it. For the range, those are the y values. Let's make a note here, the y values. And we are going to go from the bottom of the graph to the top of the graph. Okay, so I'm going to use a different color. So from the bottom to the top, so we're looking to see what's our first y value, which is going to be a -2. Going up the y's, we don't have anything until 1 and then 2. So our range is going to be 3 values, -2, 1, and 2. So this is a unique example where it's just the individual points. Okay, we're going to skip to part B, and again, I'm going to ignore the graphs there, and we're going to start with the domain. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and we want to go from left to right. So as I'm going here on the x-axis, my very first x value is going to be a -1. My last x value is a +1. So for the words, we're going to say from -1 to 1. Now, I know -1 and 1 are my numbers, so I'm going to automatically just plug them in here. And then we're going to fill out the rest. So the inequality and the interval, we need to look, is it open or closed? So at -1, we have a closed point. So that's going to get represented with a less than or equal to symbol, and then a bracket, because it's less than or equal to -1. For the 1, if we zoom in, it is an open point, so that's going to be a parenthesis and a less than symbol. So parenthesis and less than. All right. Looking at the range, those are the possible y values. I'm going to change colors and use blue. From the very bottom of the graph to the top, my first y value is a -1. My highest y value is a +2. So we're going from -1 to +2. And again, oops, didn't want to do that. We can plug in those numbers into the other two pieces. So we have -1 and 2, -1, comma 2. So looking at this graph, we have a close point at -1 and an open point at 2. So when we go to do inequality, we will say that -1 is less than or equal to y, which is less than 2. We'll have a bracket around -1 and a parenthesis around 2. Again, when you look at the graph, the closed dot is represented with less than or equal to and a bracket. Open dot is less than or a parenthesis. So we are going to bypass part C and look at part D. We talked about this one in class as well. And we are going to start with the domain going from left to right. So I'm going to ignore these there, and let's zoom in. So from left to right, my first x value is a -2. My last x value is a +2. So we can write that with our words. So from -2 to 2. Now, when we go to do our inequality and our interval notation, we're looking at the points, open or closed. So when I start at -2, that's an open point, so that's going to be represented with a parenthesis and with a less than symbol. The 2 is a closed point, so that's going to be represented with a less than or equal to and a bracket. For the range, we are going to go from the bottom to the top. So our very first y value is going to be -2. And then the very highest y value, and don't get confused with the 2 points, that's going to be the very top one, which is going to be a 1. So we're going from -2 to 1. So we need to look at the points. So -2 is a point on the graph. You don't see an open point at all, so that's going to be included. So it's less than or equal to y. That will be a bracket. The 1 is an open point, so that's going to be less than, and it's going to be the parentheses. In class, we did skip over 53. And we jumped to 54A, the circle. So, and I know I feel like a broken record here, but we're looking at the domain, which is the possible x values. So going from left to right, we're going to start at -3 and end at -3. Now, these points are all included because you don't have any open dots. So we'll have -3 is less than or equal to x, which is less than or equal to 3. And in the interval, we'll have I made a mistake, sorry. We'll have a bracket with -3, comma 3 in another bracket. For the range, same idea. Now we're going from the bottom to the top. We're going to start at -3 and go to +3. So the domain and range are almost identical. The only difference really is that the inequality is going to have a y instead of an x, but it's going to go from -3 to +3 in brackets. So everything from -3 to +3 for the x values and for the y values would give you, a point on this circle. Taking a look at part B, we have a line, and we have arrows on this line. So when we look at the domain going from left to right, so the far left to the far right, we are going forever. Those arrows mean that it's going to continue to go forever. And the way we represent that is we're going to say it's from negative infinity to infinity. So, let me just erase this here. When you have infinities, you always use parentheses. So I'm going to make a note up here that negative infinity and infinity always gets parentheses or less than symbol. They're never included, ever. So when we go to do the inequality, we're going to have negative infinity is less than x, which is less than infinity. And the interval notation is going to be in parentheses because you never put that in a bracket. Infinities always get parentheses. Now, when we go to do the range, we're going to go from the bottom to the top of the graph. And again, we have the arrows. So the range is also from negative infinity to positive infinity. The inequality, negative infinity, is less than y, which is less than positive infinity. And then the interval notation would be infinities with your parentheses. So the line is going forever. Negative infinities and infinities always get parentheses or less than. They are never included. On this page, we did skip C and we took a look at part D. When we look at the domain, we're going to go from left to right, so from here to here. Now, we want to be careful. This is not going from -4 to 2. We have the arrows. This is a parabolic shape. This is going to actually go from negative infinity to positive infinity. It is going to go forever. So when we go and we do the inequality, just like we saw in the previous problem, we're going to have our less than symbol. And then when we go to do our interval, we will write it in parentheses. Now the range is a little different. Going from the bottom of the graph to the top, you will see that the bottom is still the infinities. So we're going to go from negative infinity to positive 4. So our negative infinity gets the less than symbol, but 4 is included because it is a point on the graph. So our y is going to be less than or equal to 4, and then our interval notation will be a parenthesis with negative infinity, comma 4 with a bracket.